Welcome to Muslim Apologetics Australia. In this video, we're going to expose the double standards and hypocrisy of these so-called Westerners who are saying they stand by Israel. They stand by Israel because Israel is the only democracy, real democracy within the Middle East. Because you see, all of these Arab neighbors, they're barbarians. But Israel, we need to defend Israel because Israel is a democracy. It's the only democracy in the Middle East. Well, you want to see the real face of this so-called democracy in the Middle East? Let's hear from the mouth of the Defense Foreign Minister of Israel, making the most outrageous statements against the people of Gaza. As you may be aware, in October in 2023, just recently, we saw Hamas forces go into Israel and capture Israelis to imprison them as a prison exchange for Hamas members who are kidnapped and put in Israeli prisons. And of course, there's been many tragedies. Israelis have been killed, and on both sides, Gazans have also been killed. And there's a war, so there's a siege now on Gaza. But what does this foreign minister, what does this defense minister say about Gaza? What does he say about the treatment of Gazians? Let's have a look. This is apparently the democracy, the secular liberal democracy, the only democracy in the Middle East. Let's see his treatment of the Gazian people.
ואנחנו נוהגים בהתאם. אנחנו מטילים מצור מוחלט על העיר עזה. אין חשמל, אין מזון, אין מים, אין דלק. הכל סגור. אנחנו נלחמים בחיות אדם ואנחנו נוהגים בהתאם. אנחנו מטילים מצור.
So you heard that. Let's see what this Zionist criminal Nazi says. The Israeli defense minister ordered a genocide of all the people living in Gaza on national TV. He says, no electricity, no food, no water, no fuel, everything will be closed. And then, to add more insult to injury, he says, because all Palestinians, the Palestinians, they are all animals. He compared them to animals. This is women, children. No, this isn't just the terrorists you're targeting. No, this is children, elderly, the most vulnerable, people who are poor. All of these people will be affected, and you're specifically targeting all of these people by denying them water, food. These are essentials. This order must be considered genocide against humanity. How can an occupying state thug cut the daily essentials of all humans that belong to this land of all faiths? Where are the international criminal and human rights laws enforced by the UN? OIC leaders must act fast and take control of Palestine, UN-secured borders, and implement a security presence there. Yes, they are Zionist Nazis. You need to call it for what they are. You wouldn't cut off food and water even from a prison captive. But these Zionist Nazis cut food and water from entire innocent civilians to punish the entire people of Gaza. This is how ruthless and barbaric they are. And yet they call Hamas barbaric. Yes, that includes targeting the most vulnerable like children and the elderly. If any Muslim nation said that they would starve a Jewish or Christian minority within its borders, the entire world will be up in arms saying this is genocide and how disgraceful, evil, and barbaric it is. But when Israel does it, no one even cares, which proves how hypocritical Westerners are when they try and advocate how they are so liberal, progressive, and humane. This is disgusting and hypocritical. So how can you stand with Israel and have a conscience, have a fair conscience, and listen to this minister speak about his genocidal thoughts about the Gazans? How is it justifiable that you punish an entire nation for the acts of Hamas? How is it possible that we live in an apparently modern democracy in Israel and this rhetoric is acceptable? For those who say they stand with Israel, if the Israeli minister can come out blatantly open on national TV and talk about his genocidal thoughts and how he will be targeting innocent civilians in his genocidal thoughts, how dare you then talk about how Hamas, doesn't care about human life and it's a bloodthirsty monster and it targets civilians? How dare you close your eyes on the Israeli minister and then have a word against Hamas? How they are bloodthirsty and how they don't care about human life. And you close your eyes on what the minister has said. And it begs the question, if these people can come out and blatantly on national TV talk about genocidal thoughts and implement genocidal thoughts like it's a normality, can you imagine what these people are doing to Palestinians in captivity behind closed doors? Imagine the tortures, the starvations. If these people are doing and promoting this openly, imagine what they are doing behind closed doors. And to no wonder you can see why the resistance groups exist in Palestine, why they are so fed up by this occupation, by this bombardment of their people. In the last 14 hours, the United Nations chief has actually condemned Israel for this. Let's have a listen.
Good morning. I've just concluded an extraordinary meeting of senior UN leaders to discuss the unprecedented developments in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory. Let me begin by repeating my utter condemnation of the abhorrent attacks by Hamas and others against Israeli towns and villages in the Gaza periphery, which have left over 800 Israelis dead and more than 2,500 injured. Sadly, these numbers are expected to rise as the attacks are ongoing and many remain unaccounted for. In addition, over 100, possibly more, Israelis, civilians and military have been reported captured by armed groups, including women, children, and the elderly. Some are being held hostage inside Israel, and many others have been taken inside the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad have launched thousands of indiscriminate rockets that have reached central Israel, including Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. I recognize the legitimate grievances of the Palestinian people. But nothing can justify these acts of terror and the killing, maiming, and abduction of civilians. I reiterate my call to immediately cease these attacks and release all hostages.
I just want to interject on one point that he said. He says he understands the grievances of the Palestinian people, but it is no justification to send rockets into Israel and take hostages and so forth. Okay, we'll give him that argument. But how does it justify Israel to go out and start bombing 16 floors? Some floors are 10 floors, residential apartments to the ground without any preemptive warning, with no warning. Remember a couple of years back when the Gaza and Israel conflict war happened, before Israel would blow up a residential building, it would give warning. It would give warning, so it would send a fake detonation to give off sound, to give warning, so civilians can leave the building, right? This time around, there was absolutely no warning. No warning. So you could have all these civilians trapped inside this building without any warning. A bomb comes and they're blown to bits. So what happened to the moral values? Before you were like, oh, look how moral we are. Look how civilized we are. Whenever we throw a bomb, we give a warning. So to give civilians, time to leave. And now they've changed their stance. They're like, no more warning. We're going to blow whatever we want. So how is that justified? Let's continue.
In the face of these unprecedented attacks, Israeli airstrikes have pounded Gaza. I'm deeply alarmed by reports of over 500 Palestinians, including women and children, killed in Gaza and over 3,000 injured. Unfortunately, these numbers are rising by the minute as Israeli operations continue. While I recognize Israel's legitimate security concerns, I also remind Israel that military operations must be conducted in strict accordance with international humanitarian law. Civilians must be respected and protected at all times. Civilian infrastructure must never be a target. And we already have reports of Israeli missiles striking health facilities inside Gaza, as well as multi-storied residential towers and a mosque. Two UNRWA schools sheltering displaced families in Gaza were also hit. Some 137,000 people are currently sheltering in UNRWA facilities, with the number increasing as heavy shelling and airstrikes continue. I am deeply distressed by today's announcement that Israel will initiate a complete siege of the Gaza Strip, nothing allowed in, no electricity, food, or fuel. The humanitarian situation in Gaza was extremely dire before these hostilities. Now it will only deteriorate exponentially. Medical equipment, food, fuel, and other humanitarian supplies are desperately needed, along with access for humanitarian personnel. Relief and entry of essential supplies into Gaza must be facilitated, and the UN will continue efforts to provide aid to respond to these needs.
As you can see, the UN minister says he's deeply distressed. But notice he didn't use the word genocide. He didn't use the word genocidal thoughts. He didn't condemn them for preaching genocide. All he said was he's deeply distressed that Israel is cutting off electricity, food, and water. But he said that Israel cannot do this and that the UN will try and facilitate and help the Gazian people through this crisis by facilitating water and food. And he is outraged at the Israeli government for doing this. Yes, of course he is. But he is pleading to the Israeli government to say you need to facilitate and allow the UN to facilitate Gazians with basic humanitarian needs. So folks, ask yourself, who exactly are the extremists? Who are the terrorists? Who are those who are tyrannical? Who are those who look at Palestinians, who look at the people of Gaza as being equivocated to animals? Can you imagine any politician in the world, in America, in Australia, in Great Britain, any politician coming out and equating people to animals? because of the actions of a minority, and then cutting off food and electricity and water, you will condemn that president in the strongest fashion. But when it comes to Israel, you stand with Israel. You stand with Israel, pleading that it is the only democracy. It is the only democracy left. I want to end this video by sharing 3 links. You can have a look below these videos. Click on these links below. I'm going to put into the description section. It's a short video that explains Gaza under occupation in the world's largest prison. You can have a look at that link. You'll see how Israel has, over many, many years, has oppressed the Palestinian people. You can see the blockages, the discrimination. I'll put the hyperlink below this video. You can see it for yourself. And in the next link, it explains the nature of Western media, how they refuse to condemn. When it comes to Hamas, they condemn the atrocities, but when it comes to Israel, they refuse to condemn the atrocities. You can see that as well. And also, and I'll end it with this point, in my 42 years, I have never, ever once heard any Western politician, be it a British politician, an Australian politician, be it an American politician, I have never heard these politicians, even in Europe, whether it's France or Spain, I have never heard any of these politicians say the Palestinian people have a right to defend themselves. Have a right to defend themselves. It's always the opposite. Israel has a right to defend itself. Israel has a right. Whenever it starts killing civilians and bombing residential buildings, it's always Israel has a right to defend itself. When rockets fly into Israel, it's always Israel has a right to defend itself. But you'll never hear any of the journalists, any of the politicians from Fox Media, from CBN News, CBS, ABC, World News, The Guardian, News.com, the Jerusalem Post, the New York Times, on and on, Daily Mail. You'll never hear them say that the Palestinians have got a right also to defend themselves. Despite the poor Palestinians and the Gazans, they don't even have military capability. They are refused from being allowed to defend themselves. No, you're a terrorist. You're a terrorist for throwing rockets. You're a terrorist for trying to defend yourself. But Israel can indiscriminately throw as many weapons and bombs on Palestinians, can kidnap as many Palestinians as will, throw them into their dungeons. That is completely justifiable. It's all about defending Israel. That's Israel defending itself. That's completely justified. Israel can put genocidal thoughts and ideas and implement them, cut off electricity, cut off food, cut off water. This is all perfectly humanely justifiable in order for Israel to defend itself. This is completely justifiable. No terrorism involved. But the one that's throwing stones is a terrorist. The one that's throwing rockets, the one that's flying a little mini a flying cart. Here's the terrorist. And then they have the audacity to say, 800 or 900 Israelis have been killed. This is equivalent to September 11. This is equivalent. Can you imagine? This is now equivalent to September 11. But when over 5,000 Gazans died in the last war, no, that's not equivalent to September 11. When you blew all those buildings to the ground, those residential buildings to the ground, that's never equivalent to September 11, but only your dead is equivalent to September 11.